Good morning, everyone. I'm Kim Houghton. I'm the Chief Economist here at the Regional Australia Institute. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land I'm sitting on, the Ngunnawal people, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. And we welcome any First Nations people joining us today. Today is our 5th Regions Rising webinar. Our focus is how regional tourism has changed during COVID-19 and how regions and tourism operators have responded. I'd like to welcome our 3 guests today. Coralie Bell is the Chair of Australian Regional Tourism. Welcome, Coralie. Lisa Whitelaw, the Senior Regional Manager, Business Development with Expedia Group. Welcome, Lisa. And Catrin Allsop, CEO, Australia's Southwest Regional Tourism Organisation. Welcome, Catrin. You should have received a link to view their bios in the reminder emails from Zoom. The session is being recorded and we'll make it available online later this afternoon, along with the slides from our presenters. We're also streaming to YouTube Live for those that can't access Zoom. There are some media on the line as well today. Welcome. Also, remember to get vocal on social media using the hashtag RegionsRising, and you can tag us on Twitter at RegionalAus, that's AUS. Before we launch the seminar, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge and thank our Regions Rising National Series sponsor, Bendigo and Adelaide Bank, and their charitable arm, the Community Enterprise Foundation. Without them, we'd not be able to continue delivering these free webinars, which I think have been really valuable for keeping us connected during these strange times. So thank you to Bendigo and Adelaide Bank for their continued support and commitment to regional communities. Today, we only have an hour, so I want to make the most of it, and we'll have time for Q&A after our guests speak. You can submit your questions at any time throughout the session using the Q&A function in Zoom. Make sure you write your organisation and where you're from, and who you're directing your question to, if that applies. If your question is chosen, my team here will enable your microphone so you can ask it personally. We've received some questions in advance, and hopefully you'll hear answers to those woven into this discussion today too. I want to start with a little bit of context. National data on tourism released by the ABC last week showed that some regional markets are booming, while others are still well behind where they'd normally be at this time of year. Our title today is about whether or not domestic regional tourism can fill the gap caused by the closure of our international borders. How big's the gap? Tourism Research Australia tells us that last year we had 9 million international visitors, spending about $30 billion in Australia. But how much of that reached your region? Most international visitors favour a few destinations, our global cities, and regional places like tropical North Queensland, the Whitsundays and Uluru. It's long been a concern of regional leaders that the flow of international visitors to the rest of regional Australia is low. Our domestic tourism is very strong, worth over $100 billion last year. More than the value of our agricultural production, and much more of that spend goes regional. Of course, Australians aren't travelling overseas at the moment either. And last year we took about 5 million overseas holidays and we spent overseas about $30 billion. So if we get things right and more of us do travel domestically and regionally instead of going overseas, we could be in for a very good year. Are our regions ready? WA seems to be a leading indicator at present, with its internal borders reopened and external borders closed and those restrictions wound back. People are travelling again. Is this a sign of things to come for the eastern states in the summer? We'll come to WA later in this webinar, but we'll start with the national picture from Coralie Bell, Chair of Australian Regional Tourism. Thank you, Coralie.
Hello, thank you for having me. I don't have any slides today. I've got about 10 minutes and I'm just going to talk to you about what we're hearing about the state of play in regional tourism Australia. I'm the Chair of Australian Regional Tourism and we're an Australian not-for-profit organisation that works with federal government, state government, local government and industry collectively to try and highlight and advocate for game changers and important matters in regard to regional Australia, specifically regional tourism. For a long time, it's not anything new for you guys to know, but regional Australia has been struggling and COVID is really just the icing on a very large cake. We've had problems with drought, flood, fires and mental health, and now COVID. The definition of the tourism industry across regional Australia is is hard to define, and the big end of town, like accommodation, cruise ships, airlines, are always in the forefront. But what we know is that mum and dads, live music events, farming, working holiday makers are the bread and butter of regional Australian tourism. The ongoing challenge of government wanting to see COVID separate to the ongoing struggles of regional Australia continues to be a huge frustration across the country. From a federal perspective, JobKeeper has been hugely appreciated and continues to have high uptake across the regions, but everywhere between 3 and 4 hours drive from major population centres are reporting not just busy, but bumper busy. Crowds and fear of how to manage those crowds continue to be a challenge. But outside of that, what we're hearing anecdotally is between 70 and 90% of businesses are closing. We need to continue to help the industry work together so that JobKeeper, for those outside of regional drives of the cities, don't disappear in the long run. Mental health is nothing new to be talked about in regional Australia, but continues to be a massive problem. In recent research from Sydney Uni, suicide deaths in region are estimated to increase off the back of COVID and financial hardship, somewhere between 20 and 50%. We're talking, another 100, 200, 300 people just in suicide alone, and the support services for mental health for our businesses continue to be a challenge. Here on the South Coast, mental health waiting lists are 4 or 5 months at a time off the back of bushfires and now COVID. And it's just not okay to help our businesses stay afloat. Regional data continues to be a huge priority as we look at continuing on to federal strategy beyond 2020, beyond 2030, whatever that looks like. But we need data to help make good marketing and business decisions, but we also need some measurable KPIs so that we can plan into the future and mostly measure our success. The other thing we're continuing to hear is that iconic tourism experiences are struggling. We saw the federal government come out with zoo and aquarium packages, packages to help events and arts industry, which were very much appreciated. But when you look at examples like Sovereign Hill in Victoria, who don't qualify for some of those extra funding, is one of Ballarat's key region drivers and an economic growth sector that is supported by that experience. It contributes more than 200 million into the local economy in Victoria, sustaining more than 1,000 full-time jobs. But if that one small experience fails, there is a flow-on effect. And I think that's an ongoing challenge and conversation in identifying what those are and how we continue to support them. Cruise ships have had a lot of problems off the back of the 99 restriction, the 99 berth restriction, and ships have been out at sea with 160 berth available, but only 99 allowed to have visitors. So there's an ongoing challenge for that industry. And I think it's interesting that you talk about Western Australia and the boom that some of Western Australia has seen, but that is also one of our biggest markets that rely on international workforce. So what we're hearing is that Cable Beach can only open 1/3 of its rooms, even though they're busy and there's demand, because there's no international workforce. And it takes an hour to get a coffee at Broome. So skills shortages continue to be a problem. They've been a problem for a long time and they will be going into the future. Product development, Indigenous tourism, none of these things are new for us to talk about as regional Australia, but I guess that spotlight is there now that we're under crisis. Marketing, from what I understand, we've got a lot of local government here listening to us and some state and federal government representatives. So I think that collectively as government, we can stand together and really look at how we're losing market spend in marketing and how we can better work collaboratively together. We have every local government doing their own campaigns, state government doing their own campaigns, Tourism Australia doing their own campaigns, and how do we collectively work with industry to make sure that we don't have that bleed and that waste of money into domestic and then international when that happens. Looking forward to the federal government strategy on beyond 2020, beyond 2030, what we need is to overhaul how we address the needs of our regions. The 6 priorities for regional Australia haven't changed post-COVID, post-bushfires, post-drought. They're the that they've always been. And I think for ART, we will continue to talk about them. That's enabling infrastructure. We need to get people out of the cities and into the regions better, safer, and easier. We need reliable data, regional dispersal, and keeping product available outside of the city so people will want to travel continues to be important. If there's nothing to do when they come out, then they won't come. Skills shortages in regional areas, and now has never been more important, the role of product development and helping our operators to adjust to the new normal, and whether that's have access to the internet and have online sales or be able to deliver very different programs and sell online. There is a lot to be done in that space for the mum and dad operator that don't know or haven't had that experience before. So that's about my 10 minutes. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Coralie. I think you raised some really interesting points there, which I'm sure we'll come back to in the discussion. So thank you very much. I'll turn now to Lisa. Lisa is the Senior Regional Manager of Business Development at Expedia Group. Thank you, Lisa.
Well, hello, everyone. Just checking you can see my slide.
Yep, that's really good, really clear.
Okay, so my name is Lisa Whitelaw and I'm Senior Regional Manager of Business Development for Expedia Group Media Solutions. My team work with travel brands and non-travel brands and destinations to help them achieve their marketing objectives through our global reach and our marketing solutions. I'm based in Sydney, but originally from Edinburgh, and I've been with Expedia Group for 9 years. So who are we at Expedia Group? Well, we have over 200 travel sites in over 70 countries around the world. This is our portfolio of global brands pictured just here. And the brands that you're probably the most familiar with in Australia would be Expedia, which is one of the world's largest full-service online travel agencies. We've also got Stays, which is Australia's original vacation rental site, now part of Verbo, and also What If. So What If has been helping Aussies to plan, stay, and travel around their backyard and beyond for over 20 years. Expedia Group is a proud supporter of the Regional Australian Institute, and our core focus is really to drive recovery tourism by connecting Australian suppliers with domestic travellers. In my slides, I'll be sharing some insights and trends that show what travellers are searching for, how they're planning, what some of their sentiments are and their expectations are in this COVID time, and also showing a few examples of how Expedia Group is supporting regional tourism. So let's first take a look at some booking window data. What this is looking at is the period between a customer making a search for travel and actually going on that trip. So when we look at domestic travel, it's very short term. Over half of the searches are for travel 3 weeks or under, and then quite a significant amount for 22 to 60 days out. But really the majority of Australians are looking for domestic travel within 0 to 21 days. On the international side, it's no surprise that it's more spread out across the various booking windows, with the majority being for 91 days and beyond, travel for that time from when they searched for the trip. We can look at Spreadfast data to understand what the most mentioned keywords on Instagram are that are associated with travel and Australia. And this really helps to give us a sense of what travelers are looking for, what some of those key themes are. So nature, adventure, and road trip are the top three keywords that are mentioned at the moment, and food and hiking come into that as well. So what we can see is that Aussie travel is really being inspired by a desire to be in the great outdoors. And if we consider this plus the booking window data from before, we know that Australians are looking for travel that's short term, it's accessible by car, and it includes travel, includes nature and outdoors and adventure. And we've seen another shift, another trend to families booking holiday rentals, so vacation rentals, holiday homes. And that's for the reasons being safety, location, price, and also having more space to accommodate their families. So the combined preference for road travel and to be outside in nature and having that kind of adventure theme in any travel is really making regions very preferable and appealing for people to travel to. What we're looking at here is search growth rates over the period of 6 weeks. And you see that the blue line is for cities and the orange line is for regions. What we can see here is that regional domestic travel interest is tracking on par with city searches on our sites. And the interest in regional areas is meeting demand for city areas. We see that, and this was mentioned previously, those towns and regions that are 3 to 4 hours out with city hubs being the ones that are really benefiting during this period. We conducted a traveller sentiment study, which gives an indication of kind of trip considerations from Australians at the point of July through to the end of the year. What we found were that 76% are travelling or planning to travel domestically. 4 out of 5 are travelling under 1,600 kilometres from their home. 99% would travel by car, and the top trip types that are being taken are to visit family and friends. So it's very encouraging that so many are considering traveling domestically before the end of the year or have booked that and are planning to do it. But what are some of the barriers or the challenges that travellers are still facing at this time? Safety is definitely something that's come up. So we have separate research which indicates that, this is from What If, and it indicates that under half of Australians, just under half, are actually motivated to stay away from crowds. And we had some feedback throughout this survey that included, needing to understand what health and safety measures are being put in place to prevent the spreading of COVID. At Expedia, we want to make our customers feel as confident in this area as they can. We have introduced a new feature where our lodging partners can indicate what measures they are taking in the health and hygiene area. So on their listing within Expedia, they can indicate if there's free sanitization for guests, hand sanitization, if there is contactless check-in and check-out, enhanced cleaning efforts that might be done, and also social distancing plans. And so still on the subject of how we can reassure our travellers, these are some of the topics that came up. So 87% want to hear about health and hygiene information. That's definitely the top theme that came up. 73% of people wanted information on attractions and activities that are open for business so that they know where they can go and what they can experience when they take that trip. 70% are open to special deals and offers, and 60% are looking for off the beaten path recommendations that will help avoid big crowds. So again, that theme popping up again. And we also know flexibility is an important theme right now, and that also gives reassurance when people are booking. There's a couple of things we've done in this area. Around 70% of our lodging rates are now refundable, and we also have a filter added to our flight results listings for flexibility, which allows changes to be made to a customer's itinerary and gives them a bit more confidence when they're booking in this area. So moving on to some of the initiatives Expedia Group has done to support regional tourism. Firstly, we have a global recovery program in place at the moment, and as part of that, we have pledged a 37 million Australian dollar fund, which aims to reignite travel through destination-focused marketing campaigns. So these can be standalone campaigns or co-op campaigns where we have multiple parties coming together, but it's really for tourist boards, lodging, activities, and transportation advertisers who want to promote a destination. And to be eligible to tap into this fund, our partners need to book by November 6th, and then they can run that campaign anywhere through that point or now till the end of March next year. Now looking at a couple of brand-specific initiatives. So this year we launched quite recently the Stays Road Trip Pledge campaign. You might have seen this, it had quite a big reach domestically, but it's a regeneration project that really aimed to drive Australian regional tourism. It was initially a response to the bushfires, but then became a nationwide response and effort throughout COVID-19. Throughout this, the Stays brand partnered with Tourism Australia and several state tourist boards as well, such as Destination New South Wales and South Australia Tourism, to really amplify the message around taking a road trip in Australia this year and beyond. We also recruited multiple Australian celebrities to really hammer home that message and talk about why taking this road trip pledge was important to them. It had some great reach across multiple channels, social media, PR, our own sites. We had a partnership with Mamma Mia as out of this campaign too. And the booking results we saw really surpassed all of our targets. So we're really pleased with this. And I'm going to try and play the video, so I hope it works. Let's see.
As a reminder of the incredible power of regeneration, I stand with regional Australian towns. I vow to explore impacted places by road,
to spend generously in towns of all sizes,
to always ask locals, are you okay?
to value moments of connection with the people I love,
And find a renewed sense of adventure together.
Even when the headlines have stopped, the social media has ceased.
we will not forget the reason why we made our road trip pledge.
So that was our campaign from Stays. Moving on to another brand, What If. You may or may not be familiar with the What If Aussie Town of the Year Awards. So these have been running for 3 years, and it's a chance for us to recognise deserving Australian destinations. So destinations that have good affordability, strong accommodation reviews on our sites, and destinations that we've seen an increase in searches for throughout the previous year on What If. These awards are really designed to support regional tourism and to encourage Aussies to spend more time exploring and supporting local areas. So this year we had representation from the winners from the states, New South Wales, Victoria, Queensland, and I can't remember the last one, it was 4. And it's really a great opportunity for us to showcase these destinations in our campaign efforts. So we have multiple channels, and throughout doing this, it delivers mass reach, engagement, and increased search traffic for the winners. And the tourist boards and suppliers are given an accolade as part of this, which is a great talking point and helps them to promote themselves as well. This particular year, Coffs Harbour won kind of the key award, which was the town of the year, but it's a great opportunity for us to inspire people and get them to consider traveling out to different regional areas. And still on the subject of What If, we have a fantastic social media team. They've won awards for their work, and they deliver just fantastic Australian travel and destination focused content through a 365-day program, leveraging our Facebook and Instagram and blog channels. And so we have a very loyal audience on What If, and it's a way for us to continuously kind of highlight and give spotlight to different regions across Australia and encourage our followers to book and make that trip. I'll just lastly wrap up with a couple of sites. If you're interested in hearing more about our campaign partnerships, you can visit advertising.expedia.com. And we also have in the URL below the opportunity for you to resource some recovery guides that can be informational and help with your strategy. So thank you.
That's great, Lisa. Thank you. Great to hear about this sort of shift in visitor types and the shift in destinations. I think that's going to be a real challenge for many regions and operators to adapt to these changes. And great to hear too about the campaigns that Expedia is running to support regional tourism. Thank you very much. I'll now turn to Catrin. Catrin, also the CEO of Australia's Southwest Regional Tourism Organisation. Thank you, Catrin.
Right. Just checking you can see that one okay?
Yep, that's looking good. Yep, looking great.
Great. Excellent. So welcome everyone to my presentation. I'd just like to say thank you for taking the time to listen to me today. My name is Catrin. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Australia Southwest. We're one of 5 regional tourism organisations in Western Australia. I'd firstly like to just acknowledge the challenges that are facing my other colleagues on the East Coast, particularly in Victoria. We're definitely looking forward to those borders coming down when the time is right and welcoming you to Western Australia. So I'm hoping you're all familiar with the Southwest region. If not, I have included a map. I'm hoping, of course, it doesn't scroll when we want it to. Just a second. There we go. Okay, so this is the southwest corner of Western Australia. We're really lucky to have the wonderful wine region of the Margaret River region and the brilliant hotspots of Pemberton, Albany and Denmark. So pre-COVID, this is what our visitation looked like. We were predominantly a intrastate market, but significantly the southwest is the most visited part of Western Australia for interstate and international visitation. So that is very important for us because you can see the average length of stay for our international guests is around 12 nights, and domestically it's 4.3, and actually pre-COVID the intrastate market was around 3.1 nights. So I just wanted to also look at and put it into visual context, the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, these are going to be very familiar to you all, but this first slide is our visitation in January 2020. WA was on an absolute roll. We were having our best figures ever, visitation and spend into the state. And you can see here that regional visitation and spend was looking really strong. So fast forwarding now to April, we're in lockdown and of course everything comes to a halt. So here in Western Australia, we were actually prevented from moving even intra-regionally. So the southwest region of Western Australia was split into two areas, so we couldn't even travel within our whole area. So we became two islands within an island within an island. And you can see the dark areas of this the slide are the visitation stats, and they're all but disappeared. So moving on now, this is June. So on the 18th of May, the Southwest region was the first regional destination in Western Australia to reopen to allow Perth visitors to travel into the area. And we were really lucky to be only in lockdown for 8 weeks. We know and recognise how fortunate we are not to have community transmission. So how are we faring now? The pent-up demand has been extraordinary. Accommodation businesses are and have experienced some of their best periods ever. Something nobody would have predicted. This, however, is coming with challenges. The demand is not equal across tours and experiences. So whilst accommodation is busy, some of those attractions aren't seeing the same volume. The border uncertainty for us, you know, we can't all predict what the future holds, but what is the net effect of those borders opening for Western Australia? Will we see a lot of outbound visitation heading over to the East Coast, visiting friends and family? As Lisa said, there's a lot of strong demand for that. Or will we be able to entice people from the East Coast into Western Australia to have a domestic holiday or also visit friends and family? So that's sort of some of those unknown effects. Look, Coralie's gone through the labour force, and we're also seeing rental accommodation pressure points for people trying to find jobs in the regional area, businesses trying to keep up with that increased demand, and capacity has been one of the biggest challenges and will be going forward as the Southwest region goes into its peak summer season. Sort of a broader issue around aviation access. How can we keep that alive regionally and being cut off from the other states? And one of the smaller issues, you know, we've got events that can't go ahead, and this means that there's less for visitors to do, which is one of those other things we're worrying about. Margaret River Gourmet Escape, for example, has been cancelled for this year, which is one of our biggest events. However, there are positives, of course. So with all of this uncertainty has brought opportunity. One of the biggest effects we've seen, which has been fantastic, is the evening out of dispersal. So people are seeking out those lesser known destinations. And One of the winners has been the Albany and Denmark region. It's about a 4.5-hour road trip from Perth. So it's one of those destinations that needs people to be able to travel a bit longer, be able to stay longer, and we've been seeing some extraordinary demand for this area. It's an absolutely stunning part of Western Australia. So it's really great to see them having their moment in the sun. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the tourism businesses that have adapted during the COVID period. One of the interesting restrictions during, I think it was stage 2 or 3, was wineries. So wineries had to have be seated, they had to have patrons have food, and they also had to take their details. So this actually meant that wineries started investing in bookable products and developing experiences. And this is something that has grown post-COVID, so that's something they've taken on board. This is great for us because there's a lot more visibility around the destination and the wine tourism experiences that can be accessed by visitors. One of the other areas in south coast of Western Australia, we've got the second highest peak, which is Bluff Knoll. We had a series of bushfires here in Western Australia at the same time, and the infrastructure in this area was actually all burnt down. And this is one of our wildflower hotspots. And so that, luckily, that infrastructure has been rebuilt in time for this wildflower season to reopen. This is normally something that intrastate and interstate visitors come and do. And great to see products both ends of the supply chain. So small group tours have got on board and are marketing out to the intrastate market, and also tour operators locally in the Stirling Range National Park have also got on board with some great tours. So it's really great to see people pivoting. And we've also had some businesses that predominantly only had interstate and international visitors. They've had a really good look at their marketing plan. They've looked at when they run their tours, and now they are focusing on the interstate market with some really good success. We talk about collaboration. Coralie says, you know, everyone's trying to do marketing campaigns, local government. So we've seen some really good collaboration here in the Southwest. And we're also hoping that the more interstate visitation we have, those visitors will become advocates for the region in the future. So what are we doing as a destination to help those businesses get people to stay longer and spend more into the region? So I thought I'd really quickly go through a case study. We, as Australia's Southwest Regional Tourism Organisation, partnered with 2 other regional tourism organisations, Australia's Gold Bag and Destination Perth, to do a new iconic route. It's actually something that's been in development for a long time, but due to some state government funding, we've managed to move this along a bit faster. So this is a route that we are hoping will rival the Great Ocean Road. So welcome to the the Southwest Edge. Lisa mentioned searches for nature, for adventure and for road trips as those top searches. So this is really timely that we have brought this product to market. So we launched our website and then social media back in June. And this road trip was actually going to be an interstate and international product. So we brought that forward for the domestic market, so that we can encourage visitors from Perth to, you know, get right out into the wider region. It's a 12-day itinerary, and it winds through the edge of Western Australia from Perth through to Esperance, through the wine regions, the forests and the marine life. We call it like a little mini road trip across Australia because you actually end out in the outback. So just to finish off, we've wanted to introduce this road trip. It's for consumers to discover a journey into the heartland of an undisturbed and uncrowded Australia, a road trip that will change you forever. It will fill your lungs, leave you in awe, and have you breathing more deeply. It feeds your soul with discovery and wonderment, every turn giving you a new experience. And when those borders come down, we look forward to welcoming you on the East Coast over to Western Australia at some point in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Catrin. I'm just rummaging for my keys. I'd love to take off, but I think we're going to have to wait a little while until those borders come down. But it really great package, and clearly interesting that you've applied that both to an intrastate market now as well as to an interstate one. And I love that tactic about making it a bit of a longer trip, so thereby encouraging them to stay sort of 12 days in the region rather than just sort of 2 or 3. I think that's very clever. Some really great insights there, and thank you to all of our panelists. We've now got about 25 minutes for questions, so very happy to take your questions. Nina is reading through them at the moment, so please continue to submit your questions via the Q&A function on Zoom. I just wanted to touch on a couple of things that came out of all the presentations, and I think the really key one of the key ones for me is around this, the changing nature of, and it's been a very rapid change actually, just in the last couple of months since internal borders have opened. But it sounds to me from what each of you are saying that the nature of visitors, that the kinds of people that are now going to the places in our regional in regional Australia has shifted a bit. I mean, you know, we know in some of our inland areas it was very much dominated by the grey nomads doing these long distance road trips. Now, in contrast from what you're all saying, we're seeing families doing perhaps shorter road trips, but perhaps staying for longer in each destination. I want to ask each of you, how are places coping with that? You know, are there things that places can do to adapt their offering and adapt their sort of circumstances to those changing visitor types? And are there examples that you're seeing of businesses that are really making change to try to adapt fairly quickly to this changing visitor market? I might start with you, Coralie. Have you come across any responses to this particular issue, perhaps in your part of the world or other member organisations?
I think there's examples all over the country, depending on, you know, how broad of a question you want to make that. But any business that will be able to move quickly to meet demand, I think has a real opportunity. There's also a lot of challenges in that for mum and dad businesses, though, in how they can pivot. And there's a lot of resources available in regard to COVID safe. What we consider to be COVID safe. But my challenge to anyone listening out there is, how do we not only give a good experience to people, but how do we then get hold of those new customers that have never been before and get them to keep coming back? How do we milk the love of our regions out of our regions so that we keep talking to these people and create new visitors? Because a big fear of mine is definitely, once we open up those borders, be that state borders or international borders, are we going to have a huge mass exodus of regional Australia, and what does that look like?
Well, I'd reckon that, you know, one of the answers to that is in that sort of customer satisfaction aspect. If we give them a really wow of an experience, then they're more likely to come back and tell others about it. Lisa, have you seen evidence of these sort of changing markets? You talked about people going for whole houses rather than motel rooms, for instance. Now, you can't do that quickly. How are places coping with these changes?
I can't really speak to kind of occupancy levels or anything, but what I would say to your point on how can kind of regions cope with this influx of people that are coming is maybe a really good idea would be to work on a campaign with multiple regions that it showcases, and that way you're actually encouraging a longer length of stay, further exploration, and hopefully through that trip they will experience things that are going to encourage them to come back. So co-op campaigns, I think, can be a great way to kind of showcase something new when there's definitely demand for this right now.
Yeah, thanks. Catrin, have you seen this playing out in your region?
Yes, definitely. I think what's been really great to see is people really are seeking out some destinations that they have never been to before. They may have heard about it. And so those lesser known towns do have that capacity. So we're not over populating areas that are just normally very busy, but some of those really beautiful areas, people are taking the time to seek out on social media, other places that they can go. But certainly, I mean, we are a bit anxious about going into the summer season and what that means for operators.
Yeah, it's one of the sort of things that we're all worried about, I think, is we see a bit of a spike. What can we do to sort of extend that spike and shift it from a spike to a sort of a long tail and a long-term sort of revitalisation of interest in regions? I was listening to somebody, I was talking to somebody from Longreach yesterday, and he said he'd never seen more Audis and Porsches parked in the car park of the Longreach Founders Museum. So, you know, expectations and expectations of that client group are going to be quite different, aren't they? And I think one of the particular challenges that we're seeing in our regional places at the moment is, and I do want to spend a bit of time coming back on the places that haven't got these sort of high visitation numbers, but just spend a little bit of a moment on those that have. The COVID eating and accommodation restrictions are playing into this as well, aren't they? Because if you're going to a small town on your road trip and you find that there's not many places to eat and they're all running at sort of, you know, 10 or 20% capacity, I wondered if is one of the things that we can do is perhaps look to our councils to help with more outside dining and sort of fast track some of that to try to, you know, cope with this immediate peak, because we don't want to sort of over-capitalise in the short term. Any of you like to comment on that particular challenge, this real squeeze on types and numbers of accommodation and dining?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to comment on that. I think definitely in some of those smaller towns, we've seen places that don't have an option to eat after 1 p.m. or 2 p.m. when the cafes have closed. So we do have some training that's happening in some of those areas, which are saying, you know, you don't need a chef, but perhaps you can create something that the wait staff can just put together quickly and just serve people. It may be the farmers market. So you know, get your local produce from the farmers market or from your local store there, which have some really great produce, and make your own picnic, or you know, supporting local businesses that way, because it would be great if local councils could absolutely help in this space, but whether we can do that in the time frame that we've got, I'm not sure.
Yeah, everybody's showing how adaptable they could be. Lisa or Coralie, you got any thoughts on this one?
I think there's always opportunity for industry to work with local government, and we've seen local government really pivot to be a really strong player in the tourism sector in the last few years. They've come together, and we'll see that continue to happen. And there's a lot of councils that have opened up pathways and you know, roadways for extra dining. There's a lot of flexibility and collaboration on the ground there. That's something local government does fairly regularly, I think. It's just then if we're talking about crowds, there's a real, and I've noticed a few people in the chat, there is a real fear of locals bringing the sickness with them. And that social conscience has been something we've theoretically been talking about in tourism for years, but this is a real pinch point of what that practically looks like. And if the more local government allows people to gather in public places, then the more public and seen it is, and the more fear there is. So there's definitely a balance there, and there's a role that local government plays in helping communities feel safe as well. So I think the position local government is currently in with COVID is a challenging one, and we need to see them as an equal partner and not a barrier that takes time.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good one. Lisa, some of these issues and needs for sort of safety and security have come up in your surveys, haven't they too?
They have, that's right.
Yeah. We had a question in somebody asking about how to bring people back, make them sort of not just a one-off visitor. So if we could bring that one up, that'd be good. I think the other part of that sort of change. So I want to just touch a little bit on places that aren't part of this sort of quick the first stage of this revival. Are there things that we've seen that campaigns, or are there recommendations that you'd have, Coralie or Catrin, perhaps for places that aren't on this sort of first year of places seeing this sort of resurgence? Are there recommendations or suggestions you'd have for those sort of places in order to get themselves on the map and perhaps pick up some more of this activity over the next few months?
Yeah, I'm happy to go ahead with that. So for us, we've got some big staked campaigns going on at the moment. We've got Wander Out Yonder, we've got Workout Yonder, and we've just had a campaign around getting on board with experiences and tours with a voucher through local visitor centres. So for businesses, it is about getting online and getting your distribution where it needs to be in the intrastate space. So that might be connecting with your visitor centre, making sure you're maybe with your regional tourism organisation to get on board with campaigns, and also just understanding what your state tourism organisation is doing. There's a lot of activity happening, and I think it's not necessarily the places that are missing out. I think it's more around the product. So whether it's a tool or it's an experience. So it's about looking at your business and seeing what will be more attractive to somebody that's coming from an intrastate, from a city, rather than flying in and looking for that Australian experience. So the other thing we're also seeing is people that would normally have been going out on their 2-week holiday or 3-week holiday to Europe, they're actually now going to the travel agent and booking it as a trip here and doing those tours and experiences as well. So, and it's always about welcoming, you know, the community being welcoming to visitors and doing the best they can under their circumstances.
Thank you. Coralie?
I don't know what else there is to add on that one, to be honest. I'll leave that one where it is, and we'll go from, what's your next one? Next question.
No, it was a very comprehensive answer, thank you. But I know that, Lisa, you know, Expedia's obviously been trying to promote some places and some regional campaigns as well, and surely those dollars must make an impact over time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, to the point on what destinations can do, just going back to some of those themes that I talked about, so being able to showcase, you know, how a customer or traveler can experience being in the outdoors, being in nature, really putting that at the prevalent of your messaging. But for sure, we work with state tourist boards, regional tourist boards across the country, and we do see lifts as a result of the campaigns that we run, and we're continuing to work in this way with multiple partners across the country.
Yeah. Nina, have you got someone lined up? Yeah. So Glenn, I think you've posted a good question about how to retain these visitors coming in as lockdown sort of ends and everybody's keen to get out. Would you like to ask that question to the panel? I think Nina's going to enable your microphone. Are you there, Glenn? No, maybe he's tossed his question in and then wandered off. Have you got the question there for me, Nina? I can't actually see it here. No. So the question was broadly, how can we as regions, what can we do to sort of anchor these visitors and ensure that either they come back again or they tell other people to come back? Are there particular tips and tricks that you've all come across that seem to work in that regard?
I'll take that one first and then hand on to the other marketers here, but I think we don't need to overthink this. This is an age-old marketing question, and it goes back to strategic thinking. Like all of good marketing, it's not reactive, it's embedded in strategy. So if you're looking at who you've got, then you're talking to your visitors that are here about what they liked and what they didn't like and how you can improve. You're collecting their information, you're talking to them again next time that they might want to come, you're being in there, you're targeting them in your social media, you're being strategic in how you talk to them, and then you're also identifying gaps of those people who aren't coming. You're reading the research. Australia's got a huge amount of research on consumer insights. No matter what state you're in, every state would have their own consumer insights. So you're looking at who's not coming, how can you make a product that makes them want to come, and then when they do come, you're asking them, did they like it? When would they come back, and what would they experience again? So I think we don't have to reinvent the wheel, but we do have to think smart so that we're not wasting money.
Yeah. And I like, Catrin, I like your point about wineries having to gather that sort of customer data. That's deepening their data sets, isn't it, about who's come, what they've bought, and that gives them the ability to reach out to those people again and again and again if other similar activities are coming up they might be involved in.
Yeah, exactly. And the more businesses that we get offering those bookable tourism experiences, the more prevalent we are and the more visible we are to other visitors. But I think for me, it's really about that customer service piece. Yeah. If we can nail that, and we've got some extraordinary operators in the region. We've got some tourism award winners, Beach House at Bayside down in Albany. Their customer service is phenomenal, and people go back time and time again and they tell their friends. If everybody could, do that, I think we're on a really good trajectory to welcome visitors back time and time again.
Yeah, thank you. Lisa?
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think that definitely showing the breadth of experience that any destination has to offer can for sure encourage people to be coming back if they can't do everything the first time, but also talking to that short booking window. So, we've at the 0 to 21 days out at the beginning of my presentation. And so I think being able to serve that traveler wanting to travel within that period is really going to help with that retention and making sure that you're present and you have product and accommodation that will cater to that short lead time.
Yeah, yeah. Just I'd like to touch on another question. And again, we are clearly painting quite a mixed picture. There are places and businesses that are going well, others that are really struggling. If you've had a market, for instance, a market focus on a certain type of international visitor, and that's been a really great selling point for your business, now that market's closed, it's very hard for you to change quickly. So I don't pretend for a second that everybody's going to be in good shape. It's going to be very hard for some businesses and some organisations, which is why I think from an institute point of view, we're really hoping this next round of sort of COVID recovery funding that relates to tourism is very much place-based, because we think some places are going to need a lot more help for a lot longer than others, to be honest, and that's just the way that we're going to have to try to manage this into the future. But the other underlying challenge, I think, for a lot of us is, we're talking happily about, and Lisa had some great data about people's travel intentions shifting from overseas to domestic. We're seeing examples of that as soon as the borders come down. But it's a different thing, isn't it? I mean, it really is a different experience, a different package. I mean, I might have been going to Bali instead of going to Bali to going to Whitelaw on the side of the snowy mountains. It's a very different sort of perspective and package. And we have had some nice data coming out recently. So young people in particular, who are a key part of that overseas market, they find Australia expensive. They find the sort of the density of attractions and experiences not quite to their liking. Are there things that, how do we as a sort of nation sort of try to get that sort of customer sentiment to shift from what might have been one particular kind of holiday you'd had overseas to doing something here? Are there things that we're seeing, places that are doing well to sort of give a little sort of entry point for people that might have never had this sort of regional tourism experience before and that are picking up visitors as a result? Have any of you got any thoughts or examples along those lines?
Caitlin, I think like anything, what we're seeing about the younger demographic is that they like to do things they've never done before. They want it to be exciting. They want it to be a wilderness, but not so far wilderness that they can't have an amazing cup of coffee, and they want to eat great food and wine, but they want to balance that with a walk, and they want to feel socially responsible all at the same time. So it is a complex market to meet the demand for. So I think any region that can show a breadth, and I think Lisa's mentioned quite a few times, a breadth of experiences across a region. And if you can't do that in your little town, then you can neighbour with your next town or the next town across and show that there is more than just one thing to do. Because what we know about the regions in Australia is that we're very good at working independently, but not necessarily collaboratively as a universal group. And this particular market wants to know there's a lot to do. And one example for us on the South Coast is 100 Beach Challenge. One of the key insights is that everyone thought they'd been to the beach and it was a very boring place to be. But all of a sudden, if you can put them together as 100 Beach Challenge, it's the same beach as they always were, but you feel like you need to tick off a list and keep coming back. So think creatively about how you package your product together.
Yeah, good point. Thank you. We had Catrin?
Well, I was just going to say, even though there is a perception that we're an expensive destination, I think in this climate, when borders internationally do reopen, we're going to be an incredibly attractive destination as a safe place to travel. And I think the cost will not necessarily be first and foremost in their mind. So that's probably the only thing I just wanted to add to Coralie's.
Yeah, thank you. And we had a question along those lines from Tanya Breeze. If you're still there, Tanya, Nina will enable your microphone and you could ask a question about that process about welcoming safely people from other places into your regional community. Are you there, Tanya?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, look, we're obviously a Sydney-based organisation and we're focused on promoting and encouraging road trips and domestic drive tourism into regional areas to support regional communities. And I just wanted to hear, I guess, the regional perspective on what we should be considering as we do that, to make sure that we are sensitive to the valid concerns of people in those communities, but we can still, play a role in supporting the recovery of those communities. So, from listening today, things like reminding people about social distancing, maybe checking with their local visitor centre to see what they could do, but I was just keen to hear if there's anything else we should be keeping in mind so that we're helping to solve the challenges.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody like to respond to that one?
I was just going to say, I think it kind of simply comes down to both suppliers and travellers feeling confident about hygiene and safety protocols that are in place, and also making sure that government direction is clear so people know what they're supposed to be doing and what they're supposed to be following. And with that, that's a good kind of base to then allow travel to expand and grow.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Catrin and Coralie, I mean, Catrin, did you notice in your region, well, I mean, I know that Perth hasn't really been a hotspot, but was there a bit of resistance in amongst some regional people to seeing people coming from other parts of the state?
I'm just trying to think. Actually, what we did experience when everyone was going into lockdown, there was a big community sort of feeling about people coming from the city into the regions.
Yeah.
But it was extraordinary how quickly that dissipated once the borders reopened, and people were welcoming them with open arms. So I think in this, we're in a slightly different scenario here in Western Australia. So we're not experiencing that at the moment, and I'm not sure what the sentiment is. I can't remember what the research was saying at the moment, what the sentiment was about people coming from the East Coast. I think Western Australia won't open those borders until they want to open it and they think it's safe.
Yeah, very low risk.
Kind of out of our hands, that one.
Yeah, that's right. Coralie, have you seen any signs of that amongst your members?
I think there's a responsibility of any tourism communication at the moment where we would have once only spoken to the outside audience to also reinforce to the inside audience the importance not only of the visitor economy and tourism being everybody's business, but the responsibility of safe travel. And there are several examples around the country, but I think reminding your visitors the value of the visitor economy, how many local jobs that really does support. Also, any reminders practically on how many are visiting family and friends, because a lot of our regional areas have a large percentage that are supporting our communities. So here in the Shoalhaven, for example, it's between 30 and 40% of our visitors are visiting our old residents. So these are our kids and our grandkids. So and the jobs for our kids. So anything that can break down that barrier between visitor and local and make that human, I think and jobs and kids and families is really important. So that continued communication to your local population as well as broader is important.
And I think we really don't want to underplay that, because it came up very strongly in Lisa's research that these are quite genuine concerns of people looking to do exactly what we want them to do, which is to travel regionally. Any final comment, Lisa, on that one? Otherwise, we're getting close to time. No, all right. Well, look, thanks very much, all the panelists. It's been a lively discussion. We've had lots of chat and lots of questions coming through, which we haven't been able to get to all of them. Unfortunately, we've tried to sort of paraphrase some of those and introduce those into the overall discussion. But thanks very much to everybody for attending. I hope you've got something out of our seminar. We'll make a recording of the webinar available on the website later on this afternoon, hopefully. And that, which is regionsrising.regionalaustralia.org.au. You please feel free to keep the conversations going on social media, and we hope to see you next time at our next webinar, which is on arts and creative industries in regional Australia, and that'll be later on in October. So thanks again for all our participants, and I hope the people who are logged in and signed in and listened in got something out of it, and we look forward to seeing you all again next time.